we have, I don't know, 14 minutes or so left on this bill before we go to cloture. So for those 12 or so people who have checked out to no man's land, if you're planning to come back to vote, to walk in here for this sober occasion to vote, you have about 13 minutes to do so. All right. Somebody else is in the queue. I'll let them talk. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Dorn, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Listened a little while ago there to Senator Bosselman and Senator DeBoer talk about this bill, LB 799. Very much support the bill. During the Appropriations Committee's work this year, we talked quite often about, I call it the court system's budget, and we had a little bit of discussion about this budget also. This bill, 799, has a fiscal note of about a little over $2 million the first year and almost $4 million the second year. But I don't know if everybody quite understands or realizes who all this affects. This also affects the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals, the district and juvenile courts, judges, and also county courts. And then also it said in the fiscal note, the one thing it did too also was added Senator Aguilar's LB 81 into this bill, which added an additional county court judge in both Buffalo and Hall counties. But I also then went and started looking up, I call it our Supreme Court, and all of this falls under our Supreme Court budget or whatever. Our Supreme Court budget for this next year is going to be a little over general funds, a little bit over $216 million. So I don't know if the people of the state of Nebraska realize the impacts that and how big our court system is. It's not only district courts, county courts, but it's probation officers. It's also some of the, I call it the foster, not foster kids, but some of those kids programs yet and stuff. There are many, many things in this, and our Supreme Court budget isn't just a little budget, and this is overseen by the whole court system, and I think they do a very, very good job here in the state of Nebraska. We have many, many judges out there that put in some long days, some long times, and are very, very supportive of how our system does work here in the state of Nebraska. But when you think that, we talk about I call it our prison system and the amount of money we're spending on that and all those workers, when you look at this budget and it's $216 million of general funds the first year, and it has some revolving funds and federal funds, but $234 million is their budget. I think this also shows you the impact that the court systems have in the state of Nebraska and how it leaves an impression on so many other things that we need to be so thankful for. So I'll yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Senator Dorn. Senator Hunt, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I asked people, I said, transgender people, what is it that you want legislators to know about you and your life? And this person said, coming out to parents at 26 already felt nearly impossible. Let's see. This person said, I just want to exist. I came out right before all of this BS happened. I was actually planning to move to Missouri to live with one of my best friends, and thank God I didn't. If it was a choice, why would I choose to be treated as lesser than others? This person, Sasha, said, I found a way to live my life without the constant anxiety and depression, etc., that plagued the first 21 years of my life. All I want is the freedom to continue to live my happiest and healthiest life, and to be treated with a base level of respect by my government and community. This person, Jessica, says, I'm more than just a trans woman. I'm your neighbor. I work in higher ed supporting these bright minds. My wife and I are raising our kids to be hopeful and kind. I'm boring. All I want to do is live a quiet life. Instead, I have to be fearful of you making me even more ostracized. This person says, being trans is not the most significant thing in my life. I'm a person, and being trans is not central to my daily life. I go to work, pay my bills, have hobbies, have goals and dreams. I just want to live my life. Sylvia says, I'm a normal woman. I walk my dog, talk to the neighbors, stress about dentist appointments, etc. I love where I live. I love my family, and I live in constant fear that one election could uproot my entire life. Bryce said, I wish they could understand that the first 40 years of my life was the facade. It was a tedious exercise of going through the motions and being what other people wanted me to be. It is my life since that pivotal turning point of self-acceptance that is the authentic one. This person reminds me of two people I know in Omaha. Many of you know, because I've mentioned it several times, I ran a dress store in Omaha for about 10 years. And one thing about our store was that Mr. President, is this my third opportunity? Okay. One thing about my dress store is that we carried sizes up to 5X. So for people of size, for plus size people, we had a lot of options for them because we wanted people to come to our store with their friends, and everyone could find something that fits them. Everyone can find something they like. And we started the business with this goal. And throughout the course of owning that company, we worked with a lot of different designers all over the world, like about a dozen, to help them grade their designs up to larger sizes and make their designs in sizes besides small, medium, and large to actually fit everybody. A lot of people don't know, getting into my old life, when you're grading a pattern, what that means is you're adding inches to different parts of the pattern of the clothing to make it fit people of different sizes. And between small, medium, large, you usually add a gradation of 1.5 to 2 inches all around the seam for each size that you go up. But once you start getting into 1X, 2X, 3X, 4X, you have to grade it differently. You can't just add like 4 inches all around, because then it won't fit. Then it won't look normal, like a normal jacket or dress or something. Because, you couldn't add 4 inches to the end of the sleeve as you would for a small, medium, and large, because, a 4X person doesn't have like a 4-inch longer arm. So there's different ways that you have to grade patterns. And in my company, we worked with different designers to help them do it correctly so we could sell clothing that actually fit different people. And we had one customer who often came in the morning, often was waiting right before we opened at 10 a.m. And she was trans. She was a trans woman, and she was older, maybe in her 60s, I would say, and recently transitioned. And she had a story really similar to what I'm hearing from a lot of people who are answering this question that I asked, which is, I lived my whole life unhappy with who I was. I always knew I was trans.
That's your time, Senator.
And she's next.
And you're next in the queue.
Thank you. I always knew I was trans, and I didn't even have the language for it till I was older, because I didn't see anybody else this way. And when you're in your 60s, that makes a lot of sense. You know that you're different, but because there isn't a lot of social acceptance, there isn't a lot of social visibility of other trans people, let alone other LGBTQ identities, maybe you don't have the language or the vocabulary to express who you are. Well, this woman in her 60s, she was starting to get it, and she wanted to look cute. She wanted to look good. She wanted to finally dress the way that she really felt inside. When she started coming to our store, she was male presenting, dressing like a man. If she left our store, everyone would think that's a guy leaving the store. And it took a little time for her to get kind of confident enough to tell us that she was trans and she wanted help finding clothes that would fit her. And she was plus sized and very tall. And she was one of our most loyal customers, honestly. Is we would go to market, we went to market in London and Vegas and Los Angeles. And we would go to market and we would specifically look for items of clothing for this woman. And we'd say it needs to come in small, medium, and large. And then it also has to come up to 4X for this customer that we have, because we know that this is perfect for her. And there are many, many customers that we had over the years like this, where we'd be at a market, looking at a showroom, talking to a designer, and I'd say, this skirt is perfect for this person. This dress is perfect for this person. And sometimes on our website, about 80% of our sales were online. We would actually name the item of clothing after the person that we thought it was perfect for. And there were several times that we gave this woman free clothing, or, if she bought something, we would give her something else to take with her as well that we thought maybe was a little more outside her comfort zone, but she could try. And it was the most encouraging, awesome thing, seeing her in public, seeing her wearing something from my store, and nobody giving a F, nobody caring at all. Just be at the bar, having your beer, having your charcuterie board, whatever, having fun with your friends, and no one's looking around going, look at the tranny, look at this transgender person, look at this freak. That's the kind of thing that Senator Kauth would say. That's not anything that I ever heard from anybody in real life. But when we introduce bills and move them forward like LB 574, this is what puts a spotlight on people like this woman for no reason, who's just minding their business, just trying to live their life, who's finally out and struggling to find a dress to fit her. And that's what these responses are saying. I'm a normal woman. I walk my dog, talk to the neighbors, stress about dental appointments. I live in constant fear that one election will uproot my life. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Day, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. What a kind and lovely story to hear Senator Hunt describing how she helped take care of and show this woman that she cared for her and wanted to help her however she could, and supported her in the best way that she possibly could as a small business owner. Continuing to talk about what I didn't get to discuss yesterday, I am just going to continue to repeat myself over and over, because sometimes people are listening, sometimes they're not, sometimes they're in here, sometimes they're not. In North Carolina, they had an anti-trans bill that will cost the state more than $3.76 billion in lost business over a dozen years, according to an Associated Press analysis. North Carolina suffered financial hits, including a scuttled plan for a PayPal facility that would have added an estimated $2.66 billion to the state's economy. And we are setting Nebraska up for the very exact same thing. The letter from the Omaha Chamber of Commerce, in his discussion about the letter and the feedback that he had gotten on the chambers and the chamber weighing in on the issues, Tim Burke from the Omaha Chamber mentioned at least 2 companies that had crossed Nebraska off of their list of annual meeting sites because of the bills being considered in the legislature. He also mentioned specifically an employee who said that he declined a job in Omaha specifically because of the political climate. Over time, Burke said it became clear that efforts to recruit workers and conventions were being harmed by the dialogue at the state capitol, which is why they felt the need to weigh in on LB 574 and encourage lawmakers not to vote for it. He said that in his conversations at a recent gathering of young business professionals, it was clear that they don't want government coming between them and their medical decisions, but want the legislature to facilitate their hopes and dreams. We asked our elected officials to focus on their work on being part of the long-term solution on the policy matters of the highest importance to Nebraskans, the statement said, which, as has been stated multiple times, does not include a ban on gender-affirming care for Nebraskans or an abortion ban. That is not a policy matter of the highest importance to Nebraskans, and in fact, it is detrimental to the growth of the state from multiple perspectives. So we had the letter from the Omaha Chamber. Excuse me.
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. The letter from the Omaha Chamber, which represents 3,000 businesses, urging policymakers not to vote for LB 574. We also had another letter, independent of the Omaha Chamber's effort, that was at the time signed by more than 70 employers, urging us again not to vote for LB 574. And then we had the most recent letter that was signed by 300 plus corporations, including Nebraska-based Union Pacific and other businesses that have significant operations in the state, like Amazon, Cargill, Kellogg, Google, and US Bank, all asking us not.
That's your time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Day. Mr. Clerk, you have a motion on the desk.
I do, Mr. President. Senator DeBoer would move to invoke cloture on LB 799 pursuant to Rule 7, Section 10.
Senator DeBoer, for what purpose do you rise?
I'd like to request a roll call vote in regular order.
Members, the vote is on the motion to invoke cloture. There's been a request for a roll call vote. Regular order. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Aguilar, Senator Albright, voting yes. Senator Arch, voting yes. Senator Armendariz, voting yes. Senator Ballard, voting yes. Senator Blood, voting yes. Senator Boston, voting yes. Senator Bostar, voting yes. Senator Bostelman, voting yes. Senator Brandt, voting yes. Senator Brewer, voting yes. Senator Breezy, voting yes. Senator John Kavanaugh, voting yes. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh, not voting. Senator Clements, voting yes. Senator Conrad, voting yes. Senator Day, voting yes. Senator DeBoer, voting yes. Senator DeKay, voting yes. Senator Dorn, voting yes. Senator Dover, voting yes. Senator Duncan, voting yes. Senator Erdman, voting yes. Senator Frederickson, voting yes. Senator Holleran, voting yes. Senator Hansen, Senator Hardin, voting yes. Senator Holcroft, voting yes. Senator Hughes, voting yes. Senator Hunt, voting yes. Senator Ibach, voting yes. Senator Jacobson, voting yes. Senator Kauth, voting yes. Senator Linehan, Senator Lippincott, voting yes. Senator Lowe, voting yes. Senator McDonald, voting yes. Senator McKinney, not voting. Senator Mosier, Senator Merman, voting yes. Senator Raybold, voting yes. Senator Reapy, voting yes. Senator Sanders, voting yes. Senator Slama, Senator Vargas, voting yes. Senator Von Gillern, voting yes. Senator Walls, Voting yes, Senator Wayne. Not voting, Senator Wishart. Voting yes. Vote is 41 ayes, no nays, Mr. President, to invoke cloture.
Cloture is invoked. The next vote is to return to select file for AM 1711. There's been a request for a roll call vote. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Aguilar. Senator Albrecht. Voting no, Senator Arch. Voting no, Senator Armendariz. Voting no, Senator Ballard. Voting no, Senator Blood. Voting no, Senator Boston. Voting no, Senator Bostar. Voting no, Senator Bostelman. Voting no, Senator Brandt. Voting no, Senator Brewer. Voting no, Senator Breezy. Voting no, Senator John Kavanaugh. Voting no, Senator Michaela Kavanaugh. Not voting, Senator Clements. Voting no, Senator Conrad. Voting no, Senator Day. Not voting, Senator DeBoer. Voting no, Senator DeKay. Voting no, Senator Dorn. Voting no, Senator Dover. Voting no, Senator Dungan. Voting no, Senator Erdman. Voting no, Senator Frederickson. Voting no, Senator Holleran. Voting no, Senator Hansen. Senator Hardin. Voting no, Senator Holdcroft. Voting no, Senator Hughes. Voting no, Senator Hunt. Voting no, Senator Ibach. Voting no, Senator Jacobson. Voting no, Senator Kauth. Voting no, Senator Linehan. Senator Lippincott. Voting no, Senator Lowe. Voting no, Senator McDonald. Voting no, Senator McKinney. Not voting, Senator Mosier. Senator Merman. Voting no, Senator Raybold. Voting no, Senator Reapy. Voting no, Senator Sanders. Voting no, Senator Slama. Senator Vargas. Voting no, Senator Von Gillern. Voting no, Senator Walls. Voting no, Senator Wayne. Not voting, Senator Wishart. Voting no. Vote is 0 ayes, 40 nays, Mr. President, on the motion to return to select file.
The motion to return to select file fails. The next vote is to dispense with the at-large reading. There's a request for a roll call vote. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Aguilar. Senator Albright. Voting yes, Senator Arch. Voting yes, Senator Armendariz. Voting yes, Senator Ballard. Voting yes, Senator Blood. Voting yes, Senator Boston. Voting yes, Senator Bostar. Voting yes, Senator Bostelman. Voting yes, Senator Brandt. Voting yes, Senator Brewer. Voting yes, Senator Breezy. Voting yes, Senator John Kavanaugh. Voting yes, Senator Michaela Kavanaugh. Not voting, Senator Clements. Voting yes, Senator Conrad. Voting yes, Senator Day. Voting yes, Senator DeBoer. Voting yes, Senator DeKay. Voting yes, Senator Dorn. Voting yes, Senator Dover. Voting yes, Senator Dungan. Voting yes, Senator Erdman. Voting yes, Senator Frederickson. Voting yes, Senator Holleran. Voting yes, Senator Hansen. Senator Hardin. Voting yes, Senator Holdcroft. Voting yes, Senator Hughes. Voting yes, Senator Hunt. Voting yes, Senator Ibach. Voting yes, Senator Jacobson. Voting yes, Senator Kauth. Voting yes, Senator Linehan. Senator Lippincott. Voting yes, Senator Lowe. Voting yes, Senator McDonald. Voting yes, Senator McKinney. Voting yes, Senator Mosier. Senator Merman. Voting yes, Senator Raybold. Voting yes, Senator Reapy. Voting yes, Senator Sanders. Voting yes, Senator Slama. Senator Vargas. Voting yes, Senator Von Gillern. Voting yes, Senator Walls. Voting yes, Senator Wayne. Not voting, Senator Wishart. Voting yes. Vote is 42 ayes, no nays, Mr. President, on the motion to dispense with the at-large reading.
The at-large reading is dispensed with. Mr. Clerk, please read the title.
Engrossed Legislative Bill 799, introduced by DeBoer 10, a bill for enacting the law amendments section 24209, 24211, 24212, 24503, 2411109, 48152, 48153, 49506, 49617, 49702, reissue revised statutes Nebraska in section 24201-201, 8501 and 85-177 revised statute cumulative supplement 2022 to change judges' salary provisions relating to published judicial opinions to prescribe the number of county court judges, Nebraska Work Compensation Court judges, and provisions relating to the College of Law, rename the report of the Supreme Court of the Court of Appeals as report of decisions, and provide duties, harmonize provisions, provide operative dates, repeal the original section, and to declare an emergency.
All provisions of law relative to procedure having been complied with, the question is, shall LB 799 pass with an emergency clause? All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. Request for a roll call. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Aguilar, Senator Albright, voting yes. Senator Arch, voting yes. Senator Armendariz, voting yes. Senator Ballard, voting yes. Senator Blood, voting yes. Senator Bosson, voting yes. Senator Bostar, voting yes. Senator Bostelman, voting yes. Senator Brandt, voting yes. Senator Brewer, voting yes. Senator Breezy, voting yes. Senator John Kavanaugh, voting yes. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh, not voting. Senator Clements, voting yes. Senator Conrad, voting yes. Senator Day, voting yes. Senator DeBoer, voting yes. Senator DeKay, voting yes. Senator Dorn, voting yes. Senator Dover, voting yes. Senator Duncan, voting yes. Senator Erdman, voting yes. Senator Frederickson, voting yes. Senator Holleran, not voting. Senator Hansen, Senator Hardin, voting yes. Senator Holcroft, voting yes. Senator Hughes, voting yes. Senator Hunt, voting yes. Senator Ibach, voting yes. Senator Jacobson, voting yes. Senator Kauth, voting yes. Senator Linehan, Senator Lippincott, voting yes. Senator Lowe, voting yes. Senator McDonald, voting yes. Senator McKinney, not voting. Senator Mosier, Senator Merman, voting yes. Senator Raybold, voting yes. Senator Reapy, voting yes. Senator Sanders, voting yes. Senator Slama, Senator Vargas, voting yes. Senator Von Gillern, voting yes. Senator Walls, voting yes. Senator Wayne, not voting. Senator Wishart, voting yes. Vote is 40 yeas, 0 nays, 4 present not voting, 5 excused not voting, Mr. President.
Record, Mr. Clerk.
40 yeas, no nays, 4 present not voting, 5 excused not voting, Mr. President.
LB 799 with the emergency clause passes. Senator Kavanaugh, please state your point of order.
Thank you. I apologize. I should have come up earlier, but pursuant to rule, not on this bill, on the A bill, pursuant to Rule 8, Section 5, I believe we need to pass over the A bill because we have not completed the budget bills. So I would ask, I guess, for a ruling or an inquiry or moving past the A bill.
Senator Kavanaugh and Speaker Arch, please come forward. Senator Kavanaugh, with regard to your point of inquiry, it's my understanding that this bill has always been considered part of the budget package and moves with the budget bills. Yes. Mr. Clerk, for items on the agenda. Senator Wayne, for what purpose do you rise?
Well, I moved to overrule the chair. This is not a budget bill, and it's never been a budget bill. This is a speaker priority.
Senator Wayne and Speaker Arch, could you please come forward? And Senator DeBoer, it was your bill. Members, as a reminder, we're still on final reading. Mr. Speaker, you're recognized for a message.
So after discussions, we will pass over this bill. We'll go to the next one.
Mr. Clerk, for agenda items.
Mr. President, next item on the agenda, Legislative Bill 282. First of all, I've got a motion to recommit from Senator Reapy, priority motion that he wishes to withdraw. Next item, Mr. President, Senator Hunt would move to return to select file for a specific amendment, that being AM 1286.
Senator Hunt, you're recognized to open on your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, colleagues. Let me quickly pull this up. This is the state claims bill. And this is a motion to return to select file for a specific amendment, AM 1286. And AM 1286 is one of 3 amendments that I filed on this bill. And it inserts the following new section. Section 8. Too many things popping up. Okay. Section 8, the Children's Death in the Line of Education Fund is created. The state treasurer shall transfer $5 million from the general fund to the Children's Death in the Line of Education Fund as soon as administratively possible after the effective date of this act. The Children's Death in the Line of Education Fund shall only be used to pay claims relating to wrongful death, injury, mental trauma, or physical trauma resulting from school shooting events. Any money in the fund available for investment shall be invested by the state investment officer pursuant to the Nebraska Capital Expansion Act and the Nebraska State Funds Investment Act. We heard a bill in Business and Labor Committee this year from a woman who was at the Sonic in Bellevue or Papillion, in Bellevue, where there was a shooter that came in and shot up the Sonic and killed somebody. And there's a girl who worked at that Sonic, and she was not physically injured, but she has PTSD that is so serious and so traumatic and terrible that she hasn't been able to return to work. And she has not been able to be eligible for workers' compensation because of the nature of her damages, basically. And that bill, that conversation, I believe it was introduced by Senator Blood, and I'm open to being corrected, but this is my memory off the cuff on May 17th at 9:30 p.m. Her experience made me think about the types of claims that we compensate in this state and the way workers over the years have fought so hard for those claims to be recognized. And we're still working to make sure that people who are at their place of employment through no fault of their own, who experience an injury, are able to get compensation from their employer due to that injury. And sometimes that's also claims against the state, as in LB 282. There are lots of different state claims that we deal with here in Nebraska. And one thing that I think the state of Nebraska should be responsible for, if we are expanding access to firearms in our state, as we did this year with the passage of Senator Brewer's priority bill, making it easier for people to carry concealed weapons in our state without a permit, without any training or licensing, on the road to a lot of your personal goal of just making it legal for people to have any firearm anywhere with no training or registration at all. What we can see from other states where this has happened is simply an increase in gun violence. And of course, we're seeing an increase in gun violence in our schools all over the country. Many people have talked in this chamber who are parents of young kids about what it's like to have your kid come home and describe going through an active shooter drill, to describe going through a lockdown drill. And my son has been through them since he started school, and they're no big deal to him. To him, they're the same thing as what a tornado drill was to me, or what a fire drill was to me. During a tornado drill, we would go in the bathrooms by the gym, and they would turn off the lights, which was really scary at the time, and we would sit on the floor along the wall. For a fire drill, of course, we all go outside, past the flagpole. Past the flagpole was the key, that we all had to get out there. But when I was growing up, we never had active shooter drills. Columbine happened. The Columbine shooting happened when I was 13. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. And that was the first school shooting that kind of activated our public imagination and public consciousness around what easy access to firearms is doing to the mental health of kids in our schools. And it was the first time that there was really a school shooting that I knew about in my life. But after that happened, even though I was only 13, we never had any kind of drill for a school shooting. We never had any kind of drill for a lockdown as long as I was in school. But for kids today, that's not the same. If there should be a case where there is a school shooting in Nebraska, what AM 1286 does is it creates the Children's Death in the Line of Education Fund, which will allow for state claims against wrongful death, injury, mental trauma, or physical trauma resulting from a school shooting in Nebraska. This is something that more states should be thinking about, as ultimately, because of the laws we pass, the government is who is responsible and culpable for the increase in gun violence in our schools. We fund public education in our state, ostensibly for now, against your will, but we fund public education to make sure that every child in our state can have a quality education near their home, within driving distance, or they can be bused, that prepares them for a successful life. And that's funded by the state. So if something should happen throughout the course of that education and there is a shooting, because of the actions of the state that have loosened these gun laws, then the state has to be responsible for that as well. And that's my argument. I think it's true. For the underlying bill, LB 282, we had 15 proponents come in, not including the introducer, representing the Department of Administrative Services Risk Management, the Nebraska Press Advertising Service, the Attorney General's Office, the Nebraska State Volunteer Firefighters Association, the Nebraska Fire Chiefs Association, the State Fire Marshal, the Nebraska Accountability and Disclosure Commission, the Nebraska Department of Transportation, the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services, the Nebraska Public Employees Retirement Systems, the Nebraska Lottery and Department of Revenue, Nebraska Department of Veterans Affairs, Nebraska Game and Parks Commission, Nebraska Department of Labor, Nebraska State Treasurer, and they had 2 people come through for that, Shar Scott and Kim Juliffs. There were no opponents. Thank you, Mr. President. And there was nobody coming in with neutral testimony. LB 282, the underlying bill, is typically traditionally introduced by the chair of the Business and Labor Committee. When Senator Ben Hansen was the chair of Business and Labor, before he went to chair Health and Human Services Committee, he also introduced the state claims bill. Before that, the chair was Senator Matt Hansen, and he introduced the state claims bill. And the purpose of this is to introduce the claims against the state that are required by statute to be reviewed by the legislature. The state risk manager has submitted tort and workers' compensation claims against the state and certain write-offs for the legislature's review and the appropriation of funds. I encourage your green vote on AM 1286. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Senator Clemens, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to rise in opposition to the motion to return to select file and in support of LB 282. And I've dealt with 2 of the items. This is the state claims bill. And 2 of the items I've dealt with quite a bit. One is the Health and Human Services YPro software contract that was terminated. Is $5.5 million. That is general funds expense that will, let's see, we've already funded that. This is just to approve the authorization of the claim. We've funded that already in the deficit bill, the $5.5 million. That's found on page 77 of the budget book. Line 20, and agency 25. The other item, major item that I've dealt with here is on page 3 of the budget book. It's called State Indemnification Revolving Fund. $18,750,000 was a settlement with the State Patrol on a lawsuit regarding their retirement contributions. And that is came out of the cash reserve that is already shown in our budget and has reduced the cash reserve in the cash reserve report you see on page 3. I just wanted to let you know that those two large items have already been funded in the budget. The bill here is just to approve the claim, and we need to do both of them together. The other items, so that's $20.6 million, I think, is the total I see for the claims bill, and the majority of it is those two items. And Chairman Reapy has the rest of the items. I would like to yield the rest of my time to Senator Reapy.
Senator Reapy, you have 2 minutes and 25 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Clements. The Business and Labor Committee holds the responsibility of oversight and authority for the state claims as built into LB 282E. AM 1286 as presented is presented as an unfriendly amendment because all of the bills that are in 282E have been negotiated and settled by the risk manager, which is Mr. Simpson of the Administrative Services Agency, or by the various agencies. This particular amendment and any other amendments have not come in front of the Business Labor Committee, nor have they been filed, if you will, with the Labor Department so that the risk management people could address these. So we did have in the built into 282E is the line of duty, and those were 4 of those. Last year in 2022, the state authorized $50,000 for payment to the individual estates, and legislation was passed, and that's now $250,000. So that, along with the settlement that Senator Clements talked about.
1 minute.
Thank you, sir. With the software, which was $5.5 million, I believe, and then in the state highway patrolman, along with a number of other incidental bills, pretty much makes up the 282. I would ask you that we need tonight to pass as it is, because it's what's been settled without anything new coming to it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Reapy. And you're next in the queue, Senator Reapy. And wave. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am hearing from home about my child's active shooter training today, and it is breaking my heart. Oh, yes. Just for the record, as Senator John Kavanaugh would say, for the record, I did make the point of inquiry before Senator Wayne did about the A bill. So just want that stated for the record. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Seeing no one else in the queue, Senator Hunt, you're recognized to close on AM 1286.
Thank you, Mr. President. AM 1286 is a great amendment. It's to make sure that the state is accountable for any damages that happen in schools, and I encourage your green vote. Thank you, Mr. President. I'll request a roll call vote.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Members, the question is the motion to return to select file. Senators, please find your seats. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Senator Aguilar, Senator Albright, Senator Arch, voting no. Senator Armendariz, voting no. Senator Ballard, voting no. Senator Blood, Senator Boston, voting no. Senator Bostar, voting no. Senator Bostelman, voting no. Senator Brandt, voting no. Senator Brewer, voting no. Senator Breezy, voting no. Senator John Kavanaugh, voting no. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh, voting yes. Senator Clements, voting no. Senator Conrad, voting no. Senator Day, not voting. Senator DeBoer, voting no. Senator DeKay, voting no. Senator Dorn, voting no. Senator Dover, voting no. Senator Dungan, voting no. Senator Erdman, voting no. Senator Frederickson, voting no. Senator Holleran, voting no. Senator Hansen, Senator Hardin, voting no. Senator Holcroft, voting no. Senator Hughes, voting no. Senator Hunt, voting yes. Senator Ibaugh, voting no. Senator Jacobson, voting no. Senator Kauth, voting no. Senator Linehan, Senator Lippincott, voting no. Senator Lowe, voting no. Senator McDonald, voting no. Senator McKinney, not voting. Senator Mosier, Senator Merman, voting no. Senator Raybold, Senator Reapy, voting no. Senator Sanders, Senator Slama, Senator Vargas, voting no. Senator Von Gillern, voting no. Senator Walls, Senator Wayne, not voting. Senator Wishart, voting no. Vote is 2 ayes, 34 nays to return to select file, Mr. President.
The motion fails. Mr. Clerk, for next agenda item.
Mr. President, next item. Senator Hunt would move to return to select file for a specific amendment, that being AM 1285.
Senator Hunt, you're recognized to open on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. AM 1285 is an amendment to LB 282, and it inserts the following new section, Section 8. The compulsory pregnancy claims fund is created. The state treasurer shall transfer $5 million from the general fund to the compulsory pregnancy claims fund as soon as administratively possible after the effective date of this act. The compulsory pregnancy claims fund shall only be used to pay claims relating to wrongful death, injury, mental trauma, or physical trauma resulting from any Nebraska statute or rule or regulation restricting bodily autonomy. Any money in the fund available for investment shall be invested by the state investment officer pursuant to the Nebraska Capital Expansion Act and the Nebraska State Funds Investment Act. The intention of this amendment is to, again, hold the state accountable for damages that it directly causes by forcing Nebraskans to give birth. There is some bad news in Nebraska as of today, some breaking news, which is that today Planned Parenthood in Nebraska told me that they are booked out until July. So today in Nebraska, Senator Reapy, if a woman is 6 weeks pregnant and she needs an abortion today, the chances are she'll be past the cutoff time by the time an appointment is made available to her at Planned Parenthood in Nebraska. Advocates they told me a story about specifically one person, one friend of mine, Chelsea from NEAR, Nebraska Abortion Resources, told me that she's trying to get someone in for a medication abortion, which is the most common type of abortion in Nebraska and in the country, where you take 2 pills that end a pregnancy. And it's typically done in the first 6 weeks of pregnancy. So Chelsea told me that she's trying to get someone in for a medication abortion and literally can't. She's going to have to get someone into another state in order to get that care, because in Nebraska, they're just out of appointments at Planned Parenthood. Now, this is no worries to most of you. You say, yay, this is what we wanted, goody good. And, but, this really goes pretty much against what Senator Reapy was talking about with his vote on 626. That the reason he opposed a 6-week ban was because it was going to fundamentally prevent people from being able to end a pregnancy early in pregnancy before most people even know that they're pregnant. And that's already what's happening in Nebraska with the impending passage of LB 574, with that Frankenstein of an amendment tacked onto it. And the screws turned on Senator Reapy, chairman of Business and Labor, to force him to vote for it. The governor coming to colleagues' places of work to turn the screws on them and make them vote for it. This is the obstruction of justice, the obstruction of separation of powers at the highest level in this state. And that's what we're dealing with. We already have people in Nebraska who aren't going to be able to get abortion care, even if they're before 6 weeks pregnant right now. People right now who are less than 6 weeks pregnant, who want to terminate their pregnancy, they can't get an appointment to do that until July in Nebraska because they are so booked out. And that is the real results of policies like LB 626, like LB 574. So we know that this is going to cause mental trauma for sure. We know that this could cause physical trauma if people aren't able to end a dangerous or complicated pregnancy that presents physical danger to the mother. And we want the state to be responsible for any kind of wrongful death that occurs because of Senator Reapy's vote. And because of Senator Hughes's vote, and Senator Lowe's vote, and Senator Holdcroft's vote, and Senator Ballard's vote. Knowing that women are going to be injured, that women could die, that women could leave behind families they already have, that women could leave behind partners and husbands as they lose a wanted pregnancy. Who is going to be liable for that? I believe that if the state is forcing these people to give birth in Nebraska, often at great risk to the mother, the state should be liable for damages that might arise from that. And that's what this amendment does. It creates the compulsory pregnancy claims fund. Because in Nebraska, we're compelling people to be pregnant. We're forcing them to give birth, thanks to Senator Reapy. And he should vote for this amendment and take responsibility for that. We're making it easier in Nebraska to access guns, but we reject responsibility for the school shootings and shootings in public that are going to arise from that. There's a mass shooting in this country every day. It used to be thoughts and prayers every couple weeks, every couple months, and when is it going to be enough, and when is this finally going to end? And now it's every day, and it's to the degree that we don't even talk about it. I'm numb to it too. When I see news about a school shooting, a mass shooting, a shooting at a mall, at a church, at a synagogue, whatever, I'm sad. I say, damn, not again. But I can't even do more than that. I can push my button red on a gun bill. I have a vote to make a law, but that does no good here. I said we could start a fund to compensate families who lose a child in a school shooting in Nebraska, but the legislature rejected that. The state keeps bringing down these laws that are dangerous to Nebraskans, that increase the danger of being a Nebraskan through no fault of your own, and that's what the purpose of claims are. That's what the purpose of LB 282 is to dispense with claims against the state. If the state makes it easier to die in a public shooting, in a school shooting, then we should be responsible for that. If the state makes it easier for a pregnant woman to die in childbirth because she was forced to carry an unviable pregnancy to term by the laws in our state, then we should be responsible for that. Where does the responsibility begin and end for us as lawmakers? To hear Senator Moser tell it, we're not going to be here to worry about it, so it's not our problem. That's what he said about the tax bill. What's going to happen when Nebraska's bankrupt and the punch bowl's empty and we don't have any money? Not his problem. He'll be term limited. Next schmo can figure it out. We're taking the same attitude toward innocent Nebraskans if we don't support AM 1285. We're saying, oh, died in childbirth, your fault. You would say you should have either closed your legs and not gotten pregnant, or you should have just not lived in Nebraska. Because we know that in Nebraska, if you have a difficult pregnancy, if you have a complicated pregnancy, if there's some kind of fetal anomaly, if you're a child pregnant by rape or incest, there's functionally not going to be a way for you to get the medical care that you need. So what could result from that? Wrongful death, injury, mental trauma, physical trauma? Any kind of damages that happen to a person because of the laws that we pass, where it passes the but-for test. But for this law being passed, we would not be in this situation. But for LB 574, we would not have wrongful deaths in Nebraska at the hands of the state of women who have complicated pregnancies.
One minute.
If it doesn't pass that but-for test, the state should be responsible for compensation to those victims, because those are the victims of the state. Those are the victims of Senator Reapy, the chairman of the Business and Labor Committee and the introducer of this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Senator Reapy, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the opportunity. I think this is much to do about nothing. AM 1285 was not taken in front of the Business and Labor Committee for consideration. It has not been negotiated either by the Administrative Services Agency nor the agency as such. I might remind Senator that tonight is not a repeat of LB 574, and with all the concerns and challenges and name calling that go with that and did last night. This is currently, I would point out that the new legislation that was forwarded last night still has to go to the last opportunity. So it's not law, it won't be law, and it's not law tonight, and it won't be until it goes through the final hearing and also has the governor's signature. I think this is a made-up thing. We've been functioning in the state under the 20-week ban, if you will, and we have not had this be a situation. Quite frankly, I don't know any other term than to say I think it's totally ridiculous. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Reapy. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wasn't going to speak, but I was listening to Senator Hunt introduce this amendment, and I was intrigued. And then Senator Reapy made a comment about how this didn't have a hearing. So it was completely ridiculous. Has nothing to do with yesterday, when it has everything to do with yesterday. The amendment yesterday didn't have a hearing. It wasn't even attached to a bill in the right committee. Senator Hunt is just trying to be proactive for the destruction that is to come from your negligence. Compulsory Pregnancy Claims Fund is created. $5 million is not going to be nearly enough, Senator Hunt. Not nearly enough. That could maybe cover a handful of pregnancies. Is something needing a hearing or not needing a hearing? Let's build that legislative record, shall we? If it's a new content, it's creating a fund in the claims. It's a claims fund. Doesn't sound like new content to me. We're just willy-nilly with rules here. Precedent, procedure, yada, yada, yada. So yeah, It's not ridiculous, and everything we are doing is tied to LB 574, Senator Reapy. Everything we are doing is tied to LB 574. And the actions that you and 32 other people took yesterday have consequences. And some of those consequences are going to be that we need to enact legislation to protect the victims of your legislation. And for the 20-week ban, yes, in fact, there probably are people impacted by that that could utilize this claim if it existed. Certainly. The individuals, the birthing folk, not women, folk, the birthing folk who are impacted by the 20-week ban, which isn't actually a 20-week ban, in reality is a 14-week ban. And what we passed yesterday is a 10-week ban. And no, it hasn't been passed into law, but it may as well have been. It has to lay over. It's a procedural thing. So unless you're announcing to the world that you're not going to vote for the 10-week ban with criminal penalties, then yes, it is in effect the law, starting the moment it is passed, because it has an E clause, because this body is reckless with the constituents of the state. So I rise in support of AM 1285 because fuck it all. You all mucked things up. No, I said bucket with a B. Don't you worry. You all mucked things up yesterday, and now you need us, per usual, to clean up your mess and care for the people of this state. So that's what Senator Hunt is doing with AM 1285, and I, for one, thank her for it. And I look forward to voting for it. And I think calling another senator's amendment like this ridiculous is interesting based on the tone policing I've heard all day today. But if we are one thing we definitely are is a double standard in this place. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Hunt, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr.
Excuse me, we have a priority motion,
Okay.
Senator. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, a couple of items quickly. Senator, amendments reprinted, Senator Dorn to LB 562 and 562A. Priority motion, Senator Hardman moved to adjourn the body until Thursday, May 18th, 2023 at 9:00 a.m.
Senators, you've heard the motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. We are adjourned.